Hi everyone, my name's Natalie Anderson and this is the first of my daily videos on the family court crisis. What is this about? This is about human rights violations that are happening routinely in our family courts across the United Kingdom, in most European countries, in the United States, in Canada, in Australia, basically across the world. And very few people who haven't had the misfortune to go through this know very much about it. So the aim is to raise awareness of what's going on in the secret family courts. Because they're secret, it's very difficult for any one person to know actually everything that goes on, and especially across different countries. So as well as sort of trying to share what I know, I'll be inviting other people to come along and talk about their experiences and what they've learned as well. So if you'd like to get in touch and come along and have a chat, please do so. That would be absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I'm a co-founder of the group Family Court Crisis, as a group for parents, actually primarily mothers, to represent their own interests before government bodies. And because at the moment the situation is that people can sort of claim, oh, this is an isolated incident. We know that it isn't, and this is why we're sharing awareness and getting the word out, so that we can say, hang on a minute, we're a group, we've got an interest in this, we're a stakeholder, we want to tell you what the problem is and be part of the solution. So I'm going to share my screen and show you a little presentation that I've prepared with some information for today. Today's been a pretty busy day in the family court crisis. If I just, hang on 1 second, technical problems. Forgot to share my screen for you. It's been a lot of news today. That's the reason why I think it's a really, really good time to start doing this and start talking about this regularly, systematically. Yeah, so there are a lot of people who are going to be unhappy about me doing this. The family courts, we're told, these cases are held in secret. We're not supposed to talk about them. Quite a lot of people who do or get threatened. They get gagging orders, they get threatened with prison, they get imprisoned, and they get their children taken off them as a punishment. But it's becoming clear that some of the people who are doing this are people who are abusing this veil of secrecy and, in fact, complete lack of transparency and accountability in the family courts to protect themselves. This is not about protecting the children. Now, I agree more than anybody that it would be ideal if the family courts would deal with our children's cases quickly, effectively, lawfully, so that the children didn't have to know anything and none of this would have to be made public, but that is not happening. And it's now in the public interest, and it's in the interest of our children that this gets sorted out, because, as I say, what's happening is gross, severe, multiple, mass miscarriages of justice, and there are children involved. And as my dad once said, it's the children that are at the sharp end of this. So in doing this, in bringing this subject out to the open, bring it to the top of the agenda, and we want to talk about this in Parliament, matter of very, very high importance. We are doing it because we want to protect our children, because the law is being broken and our children's rights are being violated. They're being put in danger. Their long-term well-being is being very badly impacted. So just to make it absolutely clear, that's what this is about. But exactly because this is risky, I would ask you, please, to listen in and also to share these videos, because the more people know about this, and the more people know about me as somebody who's putting myself out there and saying enough, putting myself at risk. If something should happen to me, then a lot of people will know about it, and that might help. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that that helps all of us as well. This is about breaking the silence, the secrecy. Let's just get the thing working, and then we can go back to things being confidential. We'd all like that, but it's got to work. We've got to have accountability. All right, so where am I? Where's my, getting lost here? I have to apologize. This might be a bit rough around the edges, especially at the beginning, because time is of the essence. Yeah, our children are young, only for a short time. They're vulnerable. As a mother, I'm told, oh, it's fine. You can go back to court. You can appeal this, that, and the other. Yeah, but every single time I do that, it takes years. And we've already been in this for 6.5 years. 6.5 years of my children's life. That's too long already. That is way too long. And as they say, justice delayed is justice denied. So this is about saying these appeal mechanisms are not working. We do not have a legal remedy at the moment. It just doesn't work. Don't try and kid me that it works. It doesn't. If we go to an appeal court that absolutely refuses to do anything but rubber stamp the unlawful judgment of the court of first instance, then we haven't achieved anything. So that's not a solution. Right, my own situation is in Croatia. I had a final judgment in a child custody case just 2 days ago that was so disastrous and such a blatant violation of so many laws that it prompted me to ramp up raising awareness of this epic scandal and start these videos. And just today in the UK and Ireland, we had 2 major news stories about the family courts. Oh, here we go. The unqualified experts should not have a role in child welfare cases. This is another one in the series of reports that have started up in the Observer. You've been running for a few months now. Some of them are truly shocking. So look up journalist Hannah Summers on in the Observer, who's doing excellent work. She's got quite a few eye-opening videos articles out at the moment. And today, article. Also, it's not the first time that by far that the Times have reported on this. The story is mainly about Ireland, what's happening to mothers in the Republic of Ireland. Most of this is about parental alienation accusations. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Again, the use of unregulated expert witnesses, but I can testify it is not just unregulated expert witnesses that are causing a lot of problems. If we were to think that, then we would throw a lot of people under the bus, because the regulated expert witnesses can be just as disastrous as the unregulated ones, although I completely agree they all have to be regulated. But they've got to be effective oversight and accountability. Yeah, today, on the basis of this, the Victims Commissioner in London tweeted, and she said, my office first shone a light on this issue over 2 years ago. I'm still waiting for the Children's Commissioner to join my calls to government to urgently investigate the use of these unregulated experts, in inverted commas, and the impact on child welfare. So absolutely, it's been going on for way too long. In Parliament, they've known about this for decades. I've found records of questions being asked in Hansard, I think 20 years ago. And David Challen, after I made this presentation, also printed. He was the man who campaigned for the release of his mum, who is a victim of years of coercive control, to get her murder conviction reduced to manslaughter and finally get her released, because literally this is the outcome of the courts, the authorities' refusal. It is a refusal. It's not just a failure. It's a refusal to deal effectively with domestic abuse. It means somebody is going to kill somebody, or somebody is going to kill themselves because they just can't take it anymore. Or somebody's going to run away. And that's actually what happened to me. I had to run away from Croatia because I was absolutely trapped. I could not believe that this was happening, that nobody was taking seriously what was happening to me. And that's a common outcome. You know, victims of domestic abuse take flight. We don't need to have this happening. We need to be actually getting to grips with the problem and stop it happening. It's not that difficult, actually. So I was really, really glad, actually a bit later on, the Victims Commissioner in London also tweeted that this is a scandal. And I agree. And I'm hoping that tomorrow in the news, it will be Monday, the 14th of November, that there's going to be stuff coming out about it. It is a scandal. And why are the people who are responsible for child rights so quiet about this? The first time we actually saw somebody talking about what's happening in the family courts from the children's sector and about how the parental alienation accusations are harming children was this spring in the House of Lords, when the NSPCC came out in the UK and said something about it. So we do expect to see the children's sector stepping up and speaking up for children who are stuck in the nightmare of secret family courts. Sorry, going the wrong way. So what is going on? Why is this happening? If you agree, if you for some reason have to get divorced, and a lot of us do, unfortunately, ideally you would come to a civilized agreement on how to sort things out so that you don't have to resort to lawyers and going to courts. And I have to say, I think to an extent society is being conditioned by media reports and by maybe the entertainment industry to think, oh, get a lawyer, almost as if it's either even quite glamorous or something that you actually can't avoid when you break up. Actually, you can avoid it, and it turns out, well, you should avoid it, and certainly at the moment you have to avoid it, because going to a family court is not a solution at the moment. If you think that they're going to protect your interests, they're not. It's very dangerous, and you will end up in a cycle of institutional abuse, which will leave you stripped of your assets, of your future. That is not going to help your children whatsoever. So this is something, it's a non-starter at the moment. Somebody needs to be putting condemned notices on those buildings, and it might just be me. Yes, so this article by American journalist, look him up, Michael Volpe, he's been writing about this, as you can see, for a long time, is about the divorce industry. And in the United States, it's worth billions of dollars every year. And what we have in the rest of the world is a copy-paste of the US model. And I'm pretty sure that somebody else will be able to come and talk in another episode about how this AFCC business model, this is the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, got copy-pasted from California in the United States, where it got set up, across the United States, where it got embedded in the justice system like a cancer, and then started to spread all over the world. It's metastasized, and it is causing an extreme amount of damage to families and children, but it's also making a lot of people a lot of money. And that's why people are so very, very protective of their industries, of their professions, and they don't want to lose that lovely revenue stream. This is exactly why it's actually quite dangerous for me to be talking about this, because it's run very much like a mafia. It's a cartel. So to avoid all this, what do you do? If you can possibly, without avoid going to court, go for couples counselling if you can't reach an agreement together. However, it's ridiculous to say that. It's ridiculous to think that you can solve all of the problems by going to mediation, because I suggested to my ex-partner when things started to get difficult between us because we couldn't agree on where we were going to live, that we go for counselling, but he refused. And instead of doing that, he took the children to another country and started divorce proceedings. This is a very serious violation of our rights, and it makes life very difficult. A lot of people do things maybe not quite so extreme as abducting the children, but in other ways make it impossible for to sort of break up in a civilized fashion. So exhorting people to be civilized is not going to help unless there's somebody who's going to ask the party who's being unreasonable, who's being abusive, whose actions are impacting the other people in the family negatively to address their behavior. That's not going to work. That's what I thought mediation would do. Mediation doesn't do it. Mediation is basically aimed at blindsiding the vulnerable partner into accepting their fate, and that's not okay. Yeah, so what happened to me is very, very difficult, but I don't believe it's easy for my ex-husband either. In fact, I think it must be hellishly difficult for him. But the people who come off worst is the children. Instead of being able to give your children a nice, happy, stable life, through all this stuff, they're literally torn apart in all directions. And both parties end up being forced to pay through the nose, bankrupt themselves literally, to lawyers, to expert witnesses, mandatory air quotes, to go through all of this. That is money that should be spent on the children and invested in their future. Most people assume that when people break up, if they go to court, especially that kids stay with mum, because usually it's mum, let's face it, that does all of the childcare, or not does all of it, maybe, that carries the lion's share of the childcare and the housework. Sometimes it's the dads, not always, but who run off and so to start acting about and things. So we've got this sort of societal image, that the kids stay with the mum. But the reality, if you end up in a family court case, is that is very far from what happens. So it turns out that if you go to court in a divorce and child custody case, if one of the parents or the child or the children should say that one of the parents is violent or abusive or irresponsible, if they say anything negative, the courts will turn that against you. And lawyers will actually warn you about it. And that happened to me actually on 3 occasions in 2 different countries. So anybody that says this isn't true, I can evidence that it is absolutely true. The judges won't like it. That's what the lawyers say. And this is indeed actually what happens, because unless you're very, very lucky, everybody from judges, social workers, expert witnesses, guardian ad litems, that's another category of, I would say, useless professionals, just a waste of money and time and harmful. Social workers as well, this is a very problematic area in family courts. They will claim that you're lying. They will say you're undermining the other parent. They will victim blame you and basically secondarily victimize you, abuse you. And the outcome of all of this is it is very likely that the child will go to live with exactly the parent who has been irresponsible or violent or what have you. And this is a graph from the most convincing bit of evidence, empirical evidence that we have today. This is a study by Professor Joan S. Meyer from George Washington University in the United States, and others. Professor Meyer is doing a lot of work about parental alienation and the family courts. And what this graph shows is that in the dark green figures, you've got custody cases where fathers, this is about mothers who are claiming, saying that there's been some sort of abuse in the case, and where a father may or may not make a counterclaim, oh, she's alienating the children from me. So the dark green ones is where there's no alienation claimed, and the alienation, the pale green is where there is alienation. So this is about mothers' custody losses, and you can see in the front row, the first one's domestic violence, the second child abuse, the third one child sexual abuse, the fourth one is mixed domestic violence, and I think the child violence against the child. The fourth one is mixed child abuse and child sex abuse, unfortunately. Fifth one, any other kind of abuse. What we can see These are the percentages of women who, mothers who lose custody of their children after disclosing this kind of abuse. Very interesting that in the majority of, well, the scenario which is most likely to end up in her losing custody of the child is where there's been allegations of child abuse and child sexual abuse. And if the father lodges a counterclaim of parental alienation, then that percentage of mothers who are losing custody of their children shoots up to 64%. Now, there are a lot of people who will say, oh, that's because of false allegations. We have got data on false allegations. We know that false allegations do exist, but they're pretty rare. And knowing what people have to go through when they go through family courts and when they go through also the criminal justice system, the likelihood that somebody's actually going to put themselves through all of that is pretty slim, I would say. But what we do know is that more and more stories are coming out, absolute horror stories of mothers and children who have been through the most horrific abuse, and where the children have been taken from mum, ripped, screaming, kicking and screaming completely against their will, and forced to live with their dad. And we'll go into this a lot more deeply in some episodes to come. But that's just to give an overall picture of what is happening. So mothers are losing custody of their children when they're in child custody cases, when they are alleging domestic abuse, and particularly where the father turns around and says, no, she's just manipulative, she's lying, she's alienating the children from me. So the parental alienation experts is a whole another branch of the industry, which is particularly harmful. Yeah, the worse the behavior of the other parent, logically, the bigger the resistance of the child to having to spend time with, or especially live with that parent. And in those cases, the more likely is the child will actually end up living with them. I guess you can imagine the kind of nightmare that children and mothers in that situation go through. Yeah. One really serious example, very, very current, of this happening was the tragic case of a little boy called Thomas Valva. Just this past week, I believe it was, a court in the United States found his father guilty of second-degree murder for the death of his little boy. His mother was desperately trying to protect him in the family courts in the United States. She wasn't believed. She was accused of being alienating. She was victimized by the judge, and her little boy was sent to live with the father. And not a great deal of time passed. I think it was just a matter of a few months. And the little boy was found dead on the floor of his father's garage. He forced him to sleep in there on the concrete floor in the cold. And I am fairly sure that the story involves much worse things than that. I haven't looked into it very deeply this week because I've been involved in my own case, but it's horrific. This is something that's really, really shocked, I think, everybody in the community of parents who are going through the family courts, but also, you know, the ripples are going out far and wide of this really, really tragic case. Unfortunately, these cases are not rare at all. On the left here, you have a case in Spain of a father who, I believe it was that he was supposed to have contact with his child, after a custody and divorce case, and he ended up murdering the two little girls and dumping their bodies. This is the rationale of these people, is coercively controlling men. On the right, the reason why none of the authorities picked up that this family was in danger was because the man wasn't violent. He didn't have a criminal record, but he was coercively controlling. And the courts are absolutely, at the moment, unable to pick up on coercive controlling behaviour. The police aren't particularly good about it, either. I can testify to that. And the trouble is, and this is really serious, the family courts, even where there is a conviction, will pay no attention to it. No, the children have still got to go for unsupervised contact with dad, and sometimes with absolutely tragic consequences. So this is sort of what is called the contact at all costs sort of presumption, which a lot of people are challenging at the moment. We all want where it's healthy and safe for kids to have a contact and a good, healthy relationship with both parents. But in some cases, it is just not safe. And we need to have the professionals being able to identify which ones those are and to protect women and children. There is another aspect to all of this, and there are some mothers who are going through all of this as well. Sometimes, you know, sort of because of these stories that I've just showed you, the courts, social services, etc., will start to overreach, and they'll start to go, oh, domestic violence. So the child is at risk here. And they will start to victim blame, and they will start to say, you know, sort of accuse the parent, you know, who maybe have been a victim of domestic abuse, of not protecting the child and taking the child. So this is about enforced, you know, sort of trafficking of children into care wrongfully, you know, without good reason. Because ending up in care is realistically the worst outcome for most children. Children who've been in the care system grow up to be the most marginalized adults that we have in our society. There's lots and lots of data that backs that up. Legally, care is the last resort for children. It is only when it is truly unhealthy and unsafe for them to stay with their birth families. And we're talking about children who do not want to be removed from their mothers, from their families, and be taken and put into care. But at the moment, we've got courts handing out care orders like sweets, and in some cases, children are taken without the right papers as well. So this is another thing we'll be looking at. This is also something the authorities are not going to like at all, because it turns out that there is a lot of money to be made from children in care in what we have now, which is a largely privatized children's social care system. People should not be making money out of children in care. Private companies whose focus is on their, you know, profit margin are not going to be focused on the best interests of the children. Okay, there might be some exceptions to that, but there are too many stories of abnormal profits and of serious failings of children in the children's social care system. So this is something we're going to have our eye on. Some mothers in private family law end up sliding into public family law, and we're very, very concerned about that indeed. So to finish up this little video, what do we have to do? And we have to do it now, urgently. The courts need to be doing much better at protecting victims of domestic abuse, and children especially. The courts are not doing that. The courts are highly discriminatory. I think for most people who have grown up in a society which is largely, we feel, egalitarian, more or less, or at least you thought so, when you get into the courts, it's a whole different world of the most heinous discrimination on every single ground that you can imagine. It's a disgrace, to be honest. So they are victim blaming and making such an unholy mess of things that even if the couple was not particular loggerheads when they started, they will be after a while. Things escalate from bad to absolutely tragic, and everybody comes out at the end potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds the lighter, maybe homeless, in most cases jobless. We've done a little bit of research on that as well. Now, the UK Parliament has been talking about this for years, and today one of the campaigners to protect victims of coercive controlling behaviour and domestic abuse, David Challen, posted a video clip in Parliament from last year talking about how we assume, you know, somebody from the Home Office, a former minister, saying surely, you know, the judges are going to be paying a lot of attention to sort of getting trained up on domestic abuse. And a year down the line, things are not better. They're possibly even worse than they were. Things are, in fact, right now, I would say, at boiling point, because too many children are being harmed, too many lives are being destroyed. Sorry, guys, sorry, justice system. People are not trapped in their little isolated bubbles anymore. We have social media. We know who we are. We know who each other are. We know what's going on. The cat is out of the bag. It has got to end, and it has got to end now. And you're not going to silence us. Okay. One of the ways that they can silence you is to, start libel or, court proceedings against you for contempt of court. Yes, that might happen. I'm perfectly aware of that, but we will cross that bridge when we come to it. And I hope that by speaking out that, maybe I will stop that happening to me and to other people. So please keep an eye out for me and other victims of the family court. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that everybody working with children, with vulnerable people in the justice system, the child protection system, are not only domestic abuse aware and trauma informed, but they're also doing upfront triaging risk assessments to make sure that these are not actually domestic abuse cases that they're dealing with. And the likelihood is that most of them are, which is something which is completely overlooked at the moment. And fundamentally that everything is a lot more transparent and a lot more accountable than it is today. So it's been great to start talking about this. I would love if we can continue. I'll try and keep this regular and try and find really interesting topics to talk about. So if you'd like to get in touch, at the top of our YouTube channel, you'll find links to our profile. Get in touch with us, follow me or Family Court Crisis on Twitter. Let's do this thing. Let's get this job done finally. Let's stop the abuse in the courts. Let's reform the system and protect our children. Let's do it now, today. No more waiting. Not one child more. See ya.